Hi, I'm Bernie, and I'm 16. Tell me, how many smart devices do you have at home? Voice assistant, robot vacuum cleaner, maybe even a smart toilet seat. By the way, robots that are similar to people already exist too. Of course, they are not as smart as we are, but you have no idea what they are capable of. Listen to my story, and you'll be amazed at what my robot did. My mom and I live in a smart home in California, and of course, our house is just full of all sorts of electronics. I forgot to mention, my mother is a leading expert in Silicon Valley. They develop the smartest things. Some of them my mother brings home later to see how convenient they are in use. To be honest, I'm not very interested in all these devices. I prefer to play basketball or surf at a bay with my friends. In short, I'm just a normal teenager, not a geek like my mom. Eventually, a new smart device moved into our house. One day, I came home from school and heard my mother talking to someone in the living room. Her colleagues often came to see her, but this time it wasn't them. A girl about my age was sitting in the room. She had a cute face and a mechanical body. My mother noticed me and said with a smile, "Oh, Bernie, are you here? Meet Dolores, your sister." Sister? Mom, are you serious? What's next? Would our smart refrigerator become my brother? But what happened next made me stunned. Dolores came up to me, smiled, and held out her hand. "Hello, I am very happy to become part of your family." I knew that robots have now become very advanced, but not that much. My mother noticed my confusion and said, "You used to say that you always missed a brother or a sister. That's why I brought Dolores." I thought my mother was laughing at me. I replied that I wanted a real sister, not a stupid doll, and I went to my room. Dolores started to live in our house as an ordinary girl. My mother said that she could do a lot of things. Follow simple commands, keep up a conversation. She asked me to teach the robot to be human. What the hell? Huh? How can a mechanical doll be human? So I treated it like a common hardware. And I made her clean my room, do my household chores, and help with my studies. I must say, Dolores coped wonderfully. She didn't scold me for my dirty clothes under the bed and my bad grades at school. If she was real, she would be a perfect sister. But there was something strange. My mother often talked to Dolores about something, and when I approached, she stopped abruptly. What did she talk to the robot about? One day, my friends came to me to throw the ball in the backyard. I decided to play a joke on them. I dressed Dolores in my own clothes and introduced her as my sister. I said, "I bet this girl can beat you all." Of course, my friends didn't believe me, but when we started playing, their confidence disappeared. Dolores never made a poor shot and played at the NBA forward level. Everyone was shocked. They said that they would like to have such a cool sister. At this moment, I even felt proud of Dolores. Did I start treating her like she was human? We began to communicate more. We talked about different stuff, and I must admit, I was amazed that my mechanical sister was a very good conversationalist. The only thing that confused me, my mother, was always with us, as if she didn't want Dolores and me to be alone. But one day, something happened. We were doing the homework together as usual. My mother watched us and smiled, but then she got a call from work and left. For the first time, we weren't being watched. Dolores' faces suddenly became anxious, and she said, "Bernie, help me, I'm in trouble." "What's happening?" I was struck dumb. Isn't Dolores just a robot? Does she have consciousness? I wanted to ply her with questions, but suddenly my mother got back home. Dolores' face became cheerful and friendly again, as if nothing had happened. Mom asked, "Dolores, is everything okay?" "Yes, Miss Weber, everything is fine," she replied. We continued to do the homework, but I couldn't get what Dolores had told me out of my head. I couldn't understand what was happening. What was my mother hiding from me, and what was the robot so afraid of? But I must figure it out. The next day, I had a plan in my head. My mother had a laptop where she kept all her work. It probably also contained materials about the robot. But how to get into the laptop if it is always with her? Dolores came to the rescue. I told her my plan and asked her to play along. So when my mother was working in the living room and my sister and I were cooking dinner in the kitchen, I gave her a sign, and Dolores pretended to break down. I screamed, "Mom, something happened to Dolores! She was washing the dishes and water got in!" My mother rushed to the kitchen and began to rummage through the robot's mechanisms. While Dolores was distracting my mother, I snuck into the living room, plunged the thumb drive into her laptop, and copied all the materials related to my sister. Later, in my room, I studied everything I could find on my mother's laptop. And what I saw just knocked my socks off. It turned out that while Dolores was being tested in Silicon Valley labs, she tried to escape several times. She showed signs of intelligence and said she wanted to be human. I couldn't believe it. Was Dolores alive? But how is this possible? Did science go so far as to create artificial intelligence? Anyway, Dolores needed my help. She turned to me, and I must have helped her. The next day, I told my mother that I was going to the beach with friends and asked her to let Dolores go with us. Mom thought about it and agreed. Would she leave her unobserved? But I was glad for nothing. As soon as we got ready, it turned out that my mother was going with us. She said that she would have to take us there. At this moment, she seemed to me an evil scientist who just took the piss out of her creation. When we arrived at the beach, my friends took their boards and went to conquer the waves. Dolores and I sat on the sand and just watched the sunset. I saw a huge longing in her eyes. My sister just wanted to be human and live her life. What's wrong with that? I looked back at my mother and decided that I would save Dolores. I would help her escape. That night, I waited until my mother was asleep and snuck into her room. My mother turned it off at night, but kept it close to her. I turned Dolores on quietly and asked her not to make any noise so as to not accidentally wake my mother. Then, we quietly left the house. If my mother woke up and found out everything, my sister would forever remain a prisoner of her creators. I took my mother's car, put Dolores in it, and we drove away. We needed to be as far as possible when they would start looking for her. Then I remember how sad she was looking at the sunset on the beach, and I realized that this was the best place to set Dolores free. We arrived to the beach in the early morning. The first rays of the sun shone on us as we got out of the car. It made me even sadder. I felt like I was going to cry. So I just told Dolores, "Run! You're free! I will miss you, little sister. Maybe we'll see each other again sometime." She smiled and ran along the bank. I looked after her, and the treacherous tears still rolled down my cheeks. When I got home, it was already morning. I was wary of how furious my mother was right now. Probably she had already called the employees to look for Dolores, and when she found out that I did it, I was going to get in trouble. But I didn't give a damn, because my sister completely free now. When I got home, I immediately saw my mother calmly drinking her morning coffee and flipping through her Instagram page. She looked at me and smiled. I couldn't understand anything. Maybe she didn't notice that Dolores had disappeared? But I decided not to keep stalling. I told my mother that she would never see Dolores again. But Mom smiled and said, "Sit down, Bernie. We need to talk." What's going on? Why was she so calm? My mother said it was a test and I passed it. She started telling me and I couldn't believe my ears. It turned out that all this time she was testing not Dolores, but me. Her company wanted to find out if people were ready to empathize with robots. Would I be able to perceive the machine as a living person? I couldn't believe it. But Dolores asked me to help her. She wanted to be free. My mother calmly replied that it was just a robot that executed commands. She programmed Dolores to ask for my help. This robot had no more intelligence than an electric kettle. I shouted that my mother not dare to call my sister that. Dolores was alive. I said that I didn't believe my mother. She replied that the robot didn't need any freedom. Dolores had been found long ago and sent back to the lab. There it would be disassembled and the system would be updated. I couldn't hold back my tears. I shouted at my mother and demanded her to return my sister back. But my mother said that I went bananas. Dolores was a simple device, like a refrigerator or a vacuum cleaner. And I was completely crazy to be so attached to an ordinary machine. I was confused. Do you think I'm really sick, or is it okay to be friends with a robot? Please write in the comments because I need your help. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to have a robot friend too.